Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Sincerely Agile with Mary. Now, if you're joining us for the first time, this is a show where we want to learn, unlearn, and relearn, make change agents of ourselves, and of course, it's a place where we want to be awesome and wholesome together. My name is Mary Lanio, and as always, I am your host. Now, today we're looking at a century of history succinctly captured. And my guest today is Michael Ovienmhada, also known as Omiki. He's an author, an entrepreneur, speaker, and games inventor. And I am just going to welcome him to the show. Hello, brother.
Ah, hello, Mary.
How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you. Thank you for having me on. Thank you.
It's great to have you on the show today. It's so great to have you on. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic, fabulous. Couldn't be better. I call myself the happiest man on earth. I guess that works for me all the time.
Absolutely. All the time it works for you. Now, how have you been throughout this COVID period? I mean, one thing I noticed is the fact that you actually launched your book in January of this year. So that means you practically walked through COVID essentially. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, in essence, COVID was a kind of good cover, blessing for me. Even though I caught it for a little bit also, okay. But going back, I started to work on this book in 2019 upon my arrival in Atlanta, Georgia, in May of 2019. I was just sitting in bed one day when I got the inspiration to write a story about the 20th century. And I was like, man, this is like a huge project. How am I going to do this? And then another thing in my head told me, just get started.
That's it. Just get started. And once you get started, you just find, you have more inspiration. And I can relate to that because I mean, I write content myself. And sometimes you're thinking, oh, how do I get started? But you just need to start. And once you start, it starts to flow. We are streaming on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. And I'm just checking to see if anyone has joined us. I can see a few people join us on LinkedIn already. So I'm just going to read out your bio and then we can crack on with the questions I have for you as you take us back through the pages of history. So here goes. A psychology graduate and an alumni of the prestigious University of Lagos, and popularly known as an undergraduate entrepreneur, Michael is an avid reader, author, games inventor, and has directed a couple of stage plays. He is a news junkie and detests poor grammar. Trust me, he is the brother you don't want in your family group chat. He picks on everything, spelling, punctuation, etc. Your post in the family chat has got to be grammatically correct. My guest today is a man I am proud to call my brother, fifth in line of nine siblings. I have learned so much from him, the most important being staying calm no matter the storm. He's a father of three and he joins me today from Atlanta. Omiki, you are welcome to Sincerely Agile with Mary.
Thank
Now,
you. Thank you. Thank
to,
you.
today we're looking at a century of history succinctly captured. And that is because you have written a book titled 100 Years and Five Chronicles. 100 Years and Five Chronicles. And you'll be taking us through some, of the content you have in there. So, my first question to you is this: what triggered and motivated you to write this book?
That's a very good question. I tell you what, um, I'm constantly thinking, constantly dreaming. There's a song by Kenny Rogers, Don't Fall in Love with a Dreamer. He was probably writing about me. He probably had me in mind. Since I was little, being a reader, I always dreamed of faraway places and faraway things. And so when I came upon Shakespeare at a very early age, I was fascinated and I was like, hey, I would like to grow up to be like this someday. And then I became a teenager. I heard of Broadway. Oh, I'd like to do something on Broadway someday. And then you begin to see movies. I mean, you duck away from home at a very early age as an early teenager to go and watch films. Oh, wow, how do they do this? I would like to make a film someday. Just dreaming, all right? So I always wanted to do something great that would live beyond me, like a legacy, a kind of immortality, if you may, if you will. Just do something that you leave behind because our time on earth is so short and we need to put in the work, get the work done, get stuff done, so that when we leave, people can see something and say, hey, he did that. I knew him, you know.
That sounds interesting. And we have some people joining us. I can see Ronke here, and I can see Mariama here also. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, you talked about Shakespeare just now. And I wonder if this is, what influenced the style in which you have written this book. Now, this book is written in drama form, using the family setting of a young boy needing help from his father for a Black History Month assignment, in which he needed to pick a Black hero. So, why this approach to, writing this book?
That's interesting. Now, having written my first book really in 2002, titled "The Heart of a Soul Winner," uh, uh, essentially capturing my work as an evangelist. I went on to write my second book in 2010, titled "Occupy Till I Come,"
Right.
which is a handbook on how to evangelize. I did that and then I went on a hiatus. In 2018, when I went for my younger daughter's graduation in California, um, I was in my Airbnb for 4 days. I had plenty of time to do things by myself. And the inspiration came to write a play about Jeremy. Jeremy is the story of a wrestler whose inordinate ambition drove him to go fight in the spirit world, having conquered everybody on earth. And the question I asked at the end was, will he live to tell this story? So having written that, that was my first piece of drama work, okay? Um, I went back to Nigeria in 2018 after that trip to San Francisco for my daughter's graduation. And then I went to see Sir Victor Wifo for permission to do Jeremy as a stage play, Broadway style, Lion King style, elaborate, using his song, using dancers, using an orchestra and all of that. So I sat with the great Sir Victor Wifo, believe it or not, in his mansion in Benin City, Ekewa. And after reading the script, he gave me a big hug. He said, "Great job." He said, "But one quick observation. I noticed that the actor died in the end." He said, "Actors don't die, so please change that."
Interesting.
He said to me, "Don't you want to write a sequel? So please bring the actor back alive, okay?" So we did that and we signed the agreement. So having done that, I now wanted to put a crew together, and somebody introduced me to a director, a play director in Benin City, a very, very smart guy. I'll call that guy a genius. So I called up this fellow, and he comes to see me in Lagos. I put him up in a hotel. I say, "Hey, you're going to be my guest for a few days. I need you to do something for me. I have written this play, Jeremy, and I want to bring it to the stage in a matter of weeks. Get cracking for me." So he gets cracking.
And
So
that happened.
hold on a moment. And so that didn't happen yet. So I now took this work that he had done and I went to see a friend of mine who owns a lounge in Lekki. And I said, "Hey, I want to come here to stage Jeremy in your lounge. What
Mhm.
do you think?" And we started to talk. And she says, "Have you heard of King Jaja?" I am his great 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 granddaughter. I said, "Are you kidding me?" She said, "Go look up King Jaja. You're going to find him a very fascinating man." So that's how I went back home. 5 days later, I had written 17 pages of King Jaja of Opobo. So we ended up doing King Jaja instead of Joromi.
Wow.
So that's how that happened. So King Jaja became my second play. All right. And
Right.
then we brought King Jaja to life in Lagos. Six
Interesting.
presentations. Yes.
Interesting. And another thing that hit me was that, I mean, today, I believe we are so visual today, with internet, social media. I believe the whole art of reading is diminishing. So the idea of actually writing this as a play makes it an easy read as well, I feel.
Yeah, that was another idea I had,
Mm,
to make it an easy read, make it conversational.
yeah.
Hence, I picked a young character.
Hmm.
I picked a father and a mother. So essentially, what we have here is an educated middle class black family. We
Hmm.
are telling the story of the 20th century through the lenses of a black family, an
Right.
educated black family. Yeah.
Right. Right, I'm just going to read a short paragraph from the book. Now, this is scene 2, page 12. Father and son now talking about the Great Depression and leading to the inauguration of President Roosevelt in 1932. And as part of that conversation, I mean, we recall I am Roosevelt did say there's nothing to fear but fear itself. And here's the response from the young boy. What does it mean to say we have nothing to fear but fear itself? Also, was there a First World War? Why? Parents tell us not to fight. Teachers punish us for fighting in school. Why is it that adults fight, but we cannot fight? Now, this is quite profound. And the father goes on in scene 2, page 13, to respond. And he responds, nations are constantly at war, sometimes for big reasons, but most times for small, almost inconsequential reasons. No one ever seems to remember how the war began in the first place after so many people would have lost their lives. Now, this is quite touching at a time like this when, we all know what is going on around the world with um, Ukraine.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about that? And what is so profound about this for me is the fact that you wrote this during the pandemic.
Yes.
This was written during the pandemic. And for me, when the Ukraine war started, the first thing that hit me was the pandemic not enough? That was collective suffering for everybody. Was that not enough? What do you say to that?
Yeah, apparently not. You see, since the beginning of humanity, when we had just four people on earth, Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, mankind has been at war with itself. Think of the fact that Cain was not satisfied with his life enough for him to think of killing Abel. Right? All he needed to do was face another direction. All the gold, all the silver, all the platinum, all the wealth of the earth belonged to just four of them at that time. But he still found a reason to kill Abel. Come on. So mankind in every generation has always been mankind.
Hmm.
Nothing is going to change about mankind. When you look at the history of mankind, we've always been at war, village against village, brother against brother, sister against sister, mother against father, father against son, son against father. You go on through history, the history of Africa, the history of the Middle East, the history of Europe. It's always been a group of people who have acquired some form of power wanting to lord it over others. It's not enough for them to say, hey, there's enough space for all of us to thrive, you know? So when you look at Europe, for example, and all the wars they have fought, at one time they fought for 30 straight years. Are you with me? Yeah, from 1618 to 1648. They had the 30 years war in Europe. So many lives lost. What were they fighting over? You know, Spanish hegemony at one time, Roman hegemony at another time, different hegemonies, religious hegemony, political hegemony, uh, ideological hegemony. So you have all these things all through history, and you just wonder, will mankind ever be better than mankind? I mean, so when you go on from that period, you had great thinkers who now thought, okay, maybe the reason we are fighting is because we don't have codified systems of government. Everybody comes up with whatever they think is right for them. And so somebody like Baron de la Montesquieu comes up with the doctrine of separation of powers, 1748. He says, hey, for government to be properly formed, for the people to be happy, for democracy to thrive, we need to have three separate arms of government: the legislative, the judiciary, and the executive, co-equal branches. So it comes up with this beautiful concept. Do the nations agree to embrace them? No. So one by one, a few nations start to embrace democracy. France, the United States of America. Of course, Britain was still a monarchy all through that period. They had to be beaten into submission through the years for them to eventually embrace democracy, despite having been the people from whom the Magna Carta came about in much earlier centuries. So mankind is uh, to me, a wonderment.
Hmm.
So much of a wonderment that even the Creator himself wondered. The Bible says it repented God that he made man. He made man. He said it repented God that he made man. Mankind is, I don't want to use a French word, but mankind is something else.
Interesting. Interesting. Now, let's talk about power. We are already on the subject of power. A third term was advocated for in Nigeria by an incumbent once. Roosevelt did 4 terms, but Truman proposed a term limit that was passed by Congress in 1947. Now, talking about power today, what is your take about people in office? Do you feel, people in office for the most part hold the space in the way that they should? Is power intoxicating? We see, different dimensions of that playing out all over the continent, in Africa, all over the world, essentially. What do you say about that?
You don't need to look too far to see the potency, the drunkenness, and the high-handedness that power entails. All you need to do is, if you have children in the house, empower one child
Hmm.
to take charge of what's going on in the house, and then you see him on a roll. All right.
Wow. So the
Oh
true
yes.
character of man comes when you give them power. Right.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't matter
Absolutely.
the age.
It doesn't matter the age. They just take charge right there, you know, and some for good, some for evil. You see, I have come to the conclusion personally, having spent well over 6 decades on this earth, that there are good people and there are bad people. All right. If you put power in the hands of a good man, he's most likely to use it for the general good, for the largest number of people. If you put power in the hands of a bad person, he'll do the opposite. Okay. Now, talking about term limits, to be specific now to your question, when the American democracy started to evolve after the overthrow of the King of England, and George Washington was made president, he chose, okay, he chose. That's the operational word there now. He chose to do only 2 terms to set a precedent for people coming behind. All right. There was no law stating that all you had to do was do 2 terms and go off the stage. But he said, look, we need to give space for other people so that we'll have a culture, establish a culture, a tradition for people not to hug power for too long. All right. So that became the tradition all through history until Roosevelt, FDR became president in the middle of the Great Depression. All right. Now, when he became president, of course, he came with this big talk. We have nothing to fear but fear itself, which you referred to earlier. It was just bombastic. Are you with me? It didn't mean anything. All right. It was just a way of rallying the nation through the issues of the Great Depression when people lost their jobs, rich people started to commit suicide. Poor people didn't have jobs. People were losing their homes, losing everything that they had, businesses shutting down, hunger in the land. He needed to rally the people. Okay, so that was useful for that time. There's nothing to fear but fear itself. It doesn't mean anything. It's just bombasticism, in my opinion. Okay,
Right.
so interesting that you brought that up. Now, when you go through Roosevelt's history, you find that after he did his first term, his second term, for him, he now became a messiah in his own eyes. All right. Oh, I am here to save this nation. All right. So he did the second term. Oh, he wasn't going to stop. He did the third term. He was on the fourth term when he died. And then Truman comes in to tell you how useless the position of the vice presidency is under the American Constitution. Truman had no idea that America had a nuclear bomb, that he had made two bombs under the Manhattan Project, which FDR started as an initiative during the Second World War. Okay, so Truman comes into office and then they brief him. They say, hey, boss, we got two bombs. And he goes, what are we waiting for? All right. So, of course, you all know the story. He deploys one in Hiroshima, deploys another one in Nagasaki. The war comes to an end. Okay. And then he looks at everything again. He completed Roosevelt's term. All right. And then he went on to contest for office. And then he said, look, we need to stop this nonsense, because he had suffered as vice president, of course, under FDR. And so he took a bill to the Congress. We want term limits, all right, which was approved in 1952. Since then, every United States president has been, by law, you can't do more than two terms, all right. However, a law is a law to the extent that a good man comes to operate it. Are you with me?
Yeah.
If a bad man comes and sees that law and he tells himself, look, I am a messiah, nothing binds me about this. You
I'm
know what?
above the law.
I'm above the law. He can coerce, he can bully, he can bribe, he can kill, he can destroy, he can tear up the Constitution. Yeah, I'm sure we were close to that in the last 5, 6 years in the United States of America, but I don't want to offend people who are on the other side of the aisle with this interview.
Interesting. Thank you so much, Mickey. Wow. Now, let's talk about Hitler eating his words after Jesse Cleveland Owens won the Olympics in 1926. And if I'm not wrong, I think he came back home with 4 medals. And
1930,
okay. And
1936.
oh, okay, my mistake there. And the poor reception back home. I mean, how far really have we come with diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Wow, that's a big question. And I tell you why. You see, it's a fluid situation we have on our hands when it comes to the question of how far we have come as a
Mm,
people, as Black
mm,
people on this earth. Because when you look back in history and you think of slavery, 23 million people in shackles, in manacles, okay, at the bottom of the ship. They fall sick, they throw them to the sharks, okay. 23 million people died on that transatlantic slave trade. Are you with me? Okay. Now, you do that to human beings because you don't think that they are human, all right? That's the only explanation you can give for that kind of thing. When you think of King Leopold of Belgium going to the Congo and taking up the Congo as his personal property, are you with me? And killing 10 million people and maiming 15 million others, then you wonder whether they think we are human beings, all right? So in about 1840, no, 16, wait a minute, 1843, there was a case of Dred Scott. The Dred Scott case was the case of a black slave who went to court to challenge the United States government about the status of his citizenship.
Right.
Okay, now the Supreme Court at that time, full of white men, ruled that Dred Scott, a slave born in the United States, could not claim any rights to citizenship. Are you with me? Okay, so if that's what they thought of us, okay, in 1843, do you think that they think of us differently now? But the only difference now is that we have been in a struggle, constant, continuing, and ongoing struggle to say, hey, I am somebody. I am here. You can't discount me. Are you with me? So the struggle has been on. So when you go on, you keep going, you keep going, you keep going, you wonder, why are we still in this struggle today? Not much has changed really, except that the struggle is in a place where it cannot be dismissed.
Right.
If any group of people on the other side could get a chance today, we'll be back in 1619.
Wow.
Clearly, I mean, when you think of it, I mean, let's remove the color barrier now in this conversation and just think of Ukraine and Russia.
Hmm.
Russia, the big guy, with all the Russia has about maybe 6,619 nuclear warheads. Are you with me? They can destroy the earth 10 times over. Ukraine had been persuaded through trickery, for them to give up their nuclear arsenal. All right. Oh, we guarantee your survival. We guarantee your security. Okay. Now, Russia bullies Ukraine. I'll beat you, I'll beat you, I'll beat you. I beg now, please now, what have I done to you? Please, can we live in peace together? No, except on my terms. That is humanity for you. These Europeans to Europeans now, white people to white people. So think of white people to black people to black people, brown people to brown people. Humanity is a wonderment.
Hmm. Wow. And like you said, we see that playing out. And for me, I find it difficult to comprehend because, like I said, for me, COVID was more than enough. For me, COVID was enough, you know, to just remind us that this place is so
If I may
transient.
interject here,
Yeah.
if I may interject here, you see, so you come from all of that,
Yeah.
you come to Adolf Hitler, who made a
Hmm.
democratic system of government, okay?
Hmm.
And then he comes up with his book, Mein Kampf, all right? And he begins to talk about the Aryan supremacy. The Aryan supremacy is a mythical race. It does not exist. There's no such race as the Aryan race, okay? But it comes up with this mythical, complex jargon
Hmm.
to elevate his people above other peoples, okay? Even other white people, he subjugated under his theory of supremacy, okay? So his tendency to dominate, therefore, was justified by his premise, his original theory, treatise, okay? Now, so you look at all of that, and then you come to Jesse Owens in 1936. Now, to be specific to your question. And Jesse wins the first medal, and he wins the second, he wins the third, and he wins the fourth. And Hitler goes, there goes my theory of Aryan supremacy. He had no choice because he was the host of the Olympics, but to shake Jesse's hands. But guess what? Jesse comes back to America, and the president of the United States refuses to see him. They were angry that the guy went to win medals. Come on. Why did they even let him go in the first place? So these are the challenges we have as Black people. We have to do 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 times as much, and we just got to keep on at it. It's like water on a rock in a river. Just
Hmm.
keep, just keep, just keep chipping away at it. Keep chipping away at it until that rock breaks and another pathway is created. That's the way it's going to be. There's no other
Wow.
way.
So the struggle continues.
Oh yes.
Now, education. I mean, for me, this is what we do on this platform. Education is important to me. Information sharing, knowledge sharing is important to me. So before 1896, it was a privilege. It was a privilege. And when I think about the fact that education was a privilege, up until 1896, you can't help but think about, the Obamas on the, plantation field, right? The Michelle Obamas, the Oprah Winfreys, the intelligent women and men of color that had such high IQs but never had the opportunity to be educated. What do you say to that?
Oh yeah. You see, that's a very interesting one. Now that will take us all the way back to the
Mm,
beginning. Uh, when you talk about the first high institutions of learning in the world, they were located in Africa. Okay, Timbuktu, you know, Egypt. Are you with me? Okay, we gave education to the world. So now, education is the pathway to to your humanity.
mm,
Is the pathway to your I am somebody.
mm,
Is the pathway to your declaration of being. All right.
mhm, mhm.
Now, that is not to say that uneducated people don't have a sense of being. However, if you want to play on the big stage, you need certain things. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
The people who came to enslave our forefathers understood the power of education. And so they decided that, look, one of the things we need to do to keep slaves in perpetual bondage, not just physical bondage now, which they enforced with all the hunters and dogs they used to chase down slaves, but they also needed to do mental slavery, mental
and
imprisonment.
that's still happening till date.
Yes, yes. They needed to do that as a precursor to the
I, I can't hear you. Yeah,
sorry,
yeah.
my phone was disrupted. Can you see me now?
Okay, I can see you and I can hear you.
Yes, yes. That needed to happen, all right? Hence, Bob Marley sang the song, Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. It is the bigger problem we
Yeah,
have, mental slavery. So they needed to do that by denying Black people or the slaves any form of education.
you keep getting interrupted.
Yes, yes.
Calls coming in. Okay, go ahead. We can hear you.
Now, they needed to do that as a matter of uh, principle, okay, to keep the slaves in mental slavery. Now, once they did that successfully, they could do their business. Now, fast forward in 1865, at the end of the American Civil War, with the 14th Amendment, blacks were now granted rights. See
I
me?
can't hear you. Yeah,
Can you see me?
I can see you. I can hear you.
Okay. Now they were granted full rights. Do you know, right 5 years after the first black man got into Harvard? Now, fast forward, they didn't have good schools in black neighborhoods. So in 1896, black people went to court in the Plessy versus Ferguson case. Now, look, we need to be able to go to the same schools as everybody else. A group of white men in the Supreme Court ruled that for as long as the facilities in a black school were the same as facilities in a white school, they were equal. That's how they came up with a separate but equal doctrine,
Right.
which was another way of keeping blacks in perpetual darkness, because there was no
Segregation.
way you could have good schools in a poor black neighborhood. It was just not going to happen. Okay.
Hmm.
Fast forward, the struggle continued with W.E.B. Du Bois, coming up with the NAACP in the early 1900s. The struggle continued. But this is where uh, I am perplexed about God, all right? Because God, in his goodness, always brings people when the time is ripe. He brings people together when the time is ripe to make stuff happen for people. All right? If you get the drift, okay? He brings people together. Now, God creates a man called Thurgood Marshall. He goes to law school. He graduates and he says to himself, I am dedicating my law career to fighting for education for my people. Are you with me?
Yeah.
How does a man come up with that kind of idea when he can go make money with his law practice? So he's there fighting all these little battles. Then in the early 1950s, what happens? A group of people decide to go to court again to challenge separate but equal, which was the 1896 ruling in Plessy versus Ferguson. All right. So they consolidated all those cases and called it Brown versus Board of Education Topeka. Okay. And Thurgood Marshall comes. Now, this is where providence, this is where I just go wow with the Almighty God. Okay. With providence. Okay. Now, God in his goodness now creates Martin Luther King,
Hmm.
creates Emmett Till, a 14-year-old boy, creates Rosa Parks. Okay? Now, during that era. Now, Thurgood Marshall fighting in the courts. Okay? Rosa Parks, a young woman, there doing her thing, just going to work and coming back home every day. Emmett Till, a 14-year-old boy, decides to go to Money, Mississippi to go see his cousins to visit. All right? Two white men decide to kill him
Hmm.
for whistling at a white woman. That was his crime. Okay? Now, as these men were killing him, they wanted him to beg for his life. And they kept asking him, do you think you are better than us? Because Emmett Till was your quintessential, handsome, young 14-year-old boy full of life. He bubbled with life. If you see his pictures today, you go like, wow, this boy was a man beyond his time. He was a man meant for what he did. He
Hmm.
gave his life
Wow.
for us today. He said, ain't nobody better than nobody.
Hmm.
We are all the same. That's what Emmett Till told these two white men who were killing him. Then they shot him. All right? So we put him in one corner now. Emmett
Hmm.
Till is shot and killed, right? Now, Thurgood Marshall is in court fighting segregation. About that time, Providence kicks in. Oh my God. What happens? The Chief Justice of the United States dies. He was against desegregation. He dies. Now, Eisenhower now appoints L. Warren, former governor of California, to become Chief Justice. Guess what happens? He calls L. Warren to the White House to a dinner, and he says to L. Warren, these Southern whites, there's really nothing wrong with them. The only problem they have is they don't want their sweet little girls sitting in class with overgrown Negroes. This was at a White House dinner. And then Warren says, okay, I hear you. Eisenhower was putting his thumb on the scales of justice. At that point, trying to influence the Supreme Court justice. Okay. Warren goes back to the court, says, okay, let us hear the arguments. But listen to this. An associate justice, Justice Frankfurter, now takes a look at everything around himself. And he says, even if I did not believe in God, now I do,
Hmm.
because God had to take out the Chief Justice to
Hmm.
make this happen. So in oral arguments in court, they now ask Thurgood Marshall, why do you think there's anything wrong with separate but equal? And he says to them, he says, equal to me means getting the same thing in the same place and at the same time. And all the justices look at themselves. There's an argument that you cannot fault, an argument like that. Are you with me? And the possibility of the providence that God, of the atmosphere of providence that God had created with a Chief Justice A.L. Warren, who was open to listening, or to a Justice Frankfurter who sees the death of Justice Vincent and says, this is the hand of God. That's what I'm talking about. And so, you go on from there to civil rights. All right. What's her name? Rosa Parks now looks at the death of a Metil who had given his life. And she says, I'm tired. I'm tired. I'm not going to the back of the bus. About that time, Dr. King, he had graduated from seminary. He was sent to a church in Alabama where he was pastoring. Some people had heard him speak. They said, that man, he can talk. Let's go get him. He'll talk for us. So he had to organize the bus boycott in which Rosa Parks was involved. Okay. So you see the confluencing of people whom God had put together at it for such a time as that.
Interesting. Interesting. Wow. You said something just now. You said she said she was tired, Rosa Parks. And a lot of people today still feel that way. And it's not just about feeling that way in countries where you feel, there's racism. Even within a black nation, people are tired. Okay, tired of bad leadership, like you said. I mean, people hogging onto power. Good people get into those offices, bad people get into those offices. And that takes me to this question. There have been several great leaders also with great personalities in the pages of history. Give us some highlights of the good ones.
No, I'll start from home right there.
Yeah.
I'll look at the great King Ewari of the Benin Empire. This was the man who came up with stuff in the 14th, 15th century that people still wonder about today. When the Portuguese came and they wrote a letter back home, they said they had never seen that level of political organization, political and structural organization as they saw in Benin Empire. So it was an organized place, okay? They had areas for iron smelting. They had areas for geography, areas for history, areas for the arts and all of that. Now, you go on through history in Africa, you look at Mansa Musa,
Hmm.
you look at King Jaja of Opobo, my favorite king, okay? I mean, here was a slave boy. He was captured as a slave, as a 12-year-old boy from Umuduroha, in present-day Imo State, and taken to Boni as a slave. So we had internal slavery. It wasn't just external slavery. Are you with me, okay? So he was taken as a slave boy to Boni, and he excelled so much. The people then say, you know what? You can't be a slave. Let's make you a son of the land. So they make him a son.
Wow.
Are you with me? And then he becomes leader of one of the big boat houses in Bonny. And then, of course, there's a personality clash during that period. And then he now goes away. Say, look, 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 let's not destroy everything we have built. He goes away and he creates a town called Opobo and becomes king. Okay? His original name was Jubo Juboga. All right? But the white man couldn't call his name, so they just called him JJ.
JJ.
JJ now became Jaja. All right? That was a great king. So he went from Bonny, where he was doing well. They drove him out. He went to Opobo and created a city-state. This tells you that the thing in a man is bigger than the environment of the man. Yeah. You take a man, if you take a man such as, say, Mandela, say Dr. King, for example, if you took him out of the era in which he lived and you took him to another era, he will still thrive because of the thing
Because
that
of
is,
who he is.
yes, what has been deposited
Yeah.
in him.
Yeah.
So he
Yeah.
goes to Opobo and creates a new city state, and all the businesses, all the white businesses, now relocated their businesses to Opobo. All right. So those are some of my favorite kings in history, favorite leaders in history. Then when you come to contemporary times, you look at Otto von Bismarck, how he unified all the small states and created a unified Germany that Adolf Hitler came to destroy later through authoritarianism. Then you look through the 20th century. Of course, you look at Muhammad Ali, unstoppable. He says, I'm the greatest. Come on, come get it from me. I am the greatest. So he spoke his greatness into existence.
Yes.
All right. And he got the job done every time he was called upon. Having won the Olympic gold medal in 1960, he comes back to America and he's refused service in a restaurant. Come on. How deep can it get? So
Yeah.
he walks away unbowed. He throws his gold medal into the Ohio River.
Oh.
Yes, and he decides, you know what? I am no longer Cassius Clay. I am
Wow.
now Muhammad Ali. And of course, he changes history. Then you look at somebody like Mandela, who at the Rivonia trial, he says, look, democracy is an ideal, okay, that I believe in. But and also it is an ideal for which, if necessary, I'm prepared to lay down my life. That's leadership right there. You look at Dr. King. He died at 39. He knew that what he was doing was dangerous.
Yep.
Civil rights, voting rights, persuading LBJ to do the Great Society, the war against poverty, and all of that. He goes, longevity has its place. That's what Dr. King said. Say longevity has its place. However, greatness, that's what we're talking about. Look at the way the world has rewarded him. Over 1,000 streets in America today, over 1,000 churches, 1,000 schools are named after Dr. King. There's a
Absolutely.
memorial to his name, only next to the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. It receives about 5 to 6 million visitors every year. Come on.
Yeah.
Legends never die. Are you
No,
with
they
me?
don't.
So you
Yes, I am.
go through history like that. Look at somebody like Oprah Winfrey, all right? Born in rural Mississippi to uneducated parents, all right? She's raped at a very early age, all right? She gets pregnant. She gets impregnated at 16. That's an obstacle. That's to say you can only go so far. You can't go any further. What happens to her? She overcomes all of that. And hey, the rest is history. All
Yeah,
right.
like they say, the rest is history. I need to go to my next question because we've got just 10 minutes left. Now, the paradoxical nature of our collective existence is playing out here right now, around us. While Ukraine suffers a senseless war, the appointment of Honorable Kentaji Brown Jackson is a breath of fresh air. Your
Point of
thoughts on that?
correction. Nomination. Nomination.
Nomination. Okay.
Right.
Okay. Nomination. Okay.
Now she's been nominated.
Okay.
Ketanji Brown is today more qualified than 43 of the last 50 justices nominated to the Supreme Court.
Hmm. Hmm.
However, she is a black woman.
Yeah.
All right. And she has been met with stiff resistance and belittleness, okay, by her questioners. All right. I mean, how do you start to ask somebody who wants to go to the Supreme Court whether she has read a children's book uh, about racism, critical race theory? How do you start to ask a nominee of such high stature pedestrian questions? Uh, Many people would have gotten up to say, you know what, keep your job. But she kept her cool. You know what? I am standing on shoulders, on people's shoulders right now. Thurgood Marshall. I don't want to mention Clarence Thomas because I don't consider him a black justice. If black is a set of concepts and principles and traditions and history upon which we stand and aspirations also, Clarence Thomas has never voted for anything that comes near our aspirations. So I would say Thurgood Marshall was our first black justice, and Ketanji would be the second if she is voted for in a matter of weeks, okay, and she goes in to fight the cause. So we have come a long way, but we have a very long way to go.
Still.
Ketanji's nomination and eventual approval would be a big step in the right direction towards correcting the great injustices of our country.
That's a huge responsibility on her shoulder if she gets it. I hope she does, but that's a huge responsibility. And for me, it will have to be everyone, just rallying behind her to uplift, um, everything to do with the black man, because, like you said, we've got a lot of catching up to do. Now, still on the subject of leadership, and like I said, this is a paradox right here. Ukraine, Zelensky. What kind of a leader do you think this man is today? I mean,
Uh,
what has
that's my
has
guy right
he
there.
has he redefined the
Leadership.
office of the president? Has he
Absolutely.
redefined leadership?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, in the lead up to the war, I had written an article where I thought that Ukraine needed to declare neutrality. A group of people needed to come together. European nations needed to come together with the support of the United States
Mm,
and NATO to declare Ukrainian neutrality to
mm,
stave off the war. But the
mhm.
war haven't started, regardless of all the entreaties to Putin. When the war began, and the notion was mooted to Zelensky for them to give him a plane for him to escape. He said, he said, I don't need a ride. I need guns. Now, that changed everything. Once he did that, Ukrainians all over the world started to rally, dump their jobs, give up their careers, get on the plane. As at the last report, over 500,000 Ukrainians from around the world had gone back to pick up guns. You see mothers taking their children from Ukraine to safety in Poland or elsewhere. They go back. I want to take a gun. I want to be with my husband and fight for our country. That is leadership right there. If you want to talk about profiles in courage, that is the ultimate profile in courage for our century. When the history of this century will be written in the next century, Zelensky's name will be prominent among the people who stood for what leadership should be defined
Should
as.
be defined as. Absolutely, absolutely. Wow, I'm so touched by what he has done. I will not lie, because the classic thing would be to just whisk the president and his family away. So that is quite very, very courageous. Very, very courageous. Now we've got 6 minutes to the hour. You wrote a book, 100 Years and Five Chronicles. We haven't got time to look at all the chronicles, but it will be interesting if you can just give us a brief teaser on the first chronicle, 60 seconds at the Highway Restaurant, 3 minutes.
I tell you what, In 2007, I went back to Nigeria because I wanted to go back to contribute to the growth of my country. All right. At heart, I'd always been a restaurateur all my life. I opened my first restaurant when I was probably 18, 19 at the University of Lagos. Okay. So I always wanted to open a highway restaurant. So coming to America and seeing what they had done with the highway restaurants around, I was like, man, this is what I've always dreamed of. So I went back to Nigeria to try to do the same thing. Now, we eventually opened for business November 2nd, 2009. In May 2010, one day I was sitting on a hilly space on the property under a tree that was really my office, more or less, to survey everything that was going on every day. About 12 noon, a black car drives into my property, and two men alight from this vehicle and go inside the restaurant. The policeman carrying them comes out with his gun over his shoulders, and then he begins to pee right there in the car park. So one of my security men starts to walk towards him as I'm on the hill. As I see this security man walking towards him, instinctively, I knew there was going to be trouble because that security man of mine was a troublemaker. Are you with me? He had been in a
Okay.
couple of fights already. So him interacting with this policeman to tell him not to pee in the parking lot.
High
Let him
stakes.
pee. Let
High
him
stakes.
pee.
Yeah.
Yes. So before all of this happened in a matter of seconds, before I knew what was happening, both of them were interacting and they were in a scuffle. The policeman's gun falls off his shoulders and engages and begins to fire. Now, Providence, without giving away all of the story. The place is filled with buses coming from all over the country, from the east, from Benin, from everywhere, from Lagos. At that point in time, we probably had about 100 buses on the property. So when you look at it, with 15 people on the bus, that's about 1,500 people in the premises at the time. And there's a young boy called Emeka on his way to Europe.
Hmm.
Question is,
What happened?
what happened to Emeka?
Get the book. Get the book and find out what happened to Emeka. Where can we find the book? I
Is on
believe we can
Amazon?
get it on Amazon. Yeah.
Is on Amazon.
So
It's on
the
Amazon.
book is on Amazon, and you will find Michael Ovienmhada, my brother, on LinkedIn. So please connect with him. Get the book if you find it interesting enough and you want to, know more about the last century. You will have a high, bird's eye view summary in the book. We've got just 3 minutes to the hour now. Let's see. We've got some more comments here. Someone here says master analysis. Thank you very much. You did justice there. The hour went too quickly. Absolutely. When you're having, fun, the time goes very quickly. And Stella here says, truth is, I never tire of hearing your deep wealth of history and your unique way of delivery. Well done, Mr. Oviemhada. Those are the comments coming in. Thank you so much. Now, I'm taking a break. So the whole of April, there will be no Sincerely Agile with Mary. I'm taking a much needed break, a much needed break. But I will be back on the 1st of May. And on the 1st of May, we're going to be talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And joining me will be the amazing Pamela Ayuade, Femi Odelusi, and Itopa Sule. To everyone who has joined us here today, I am grateful. Thank you for your time. Um, the link on Amazon, my assistant is not here today. He hasn't shared all those information. Go to Amazon and just type 100 years and five
One,
chronicles.
100 years and
100 years
five
and
chronicles.
five
Yeah.
chronicles, and you can link up with him on LinkedIn, and you will get more information about the book. Professor Mickey, absolutely, excellent delivery. Thank you so much, Dr. Michael. Thank you for showing up all the time. I hope we've done justice to the show today. Thank you, Mickey, for your great wealth of information and the way you deliver that. Thank you so much. So, to our audience, thank you. See you in 4 weeks, I believe that is. See you in 4 weeks.
Thank
Mickey,
you, Mary. Thank you,
thank you
Mary.
so
You know what
much.
makes this so beautiful?
Yeah,
A prophet is never without honor except in his own country and among his own people. For you, my sister, to consider to interview me for your program is a very, very great honor. Thank you very much.
it
Thank
was a
you.
great pleasure having you. Bye bye, everyone.
Bye
Bye.
bye.